Basically, I'll give you a brief summary of what the concept of one welfare is and how it can help support global challenges in a holistic way. So, of course, to understand what one welfare is, we use this infographic umbrella, which actually shows how the welfare of animals, human well-being, and the environment interconnect with each other in many different ways. So it's not just related to food, so it relates to many other aspects of our daily lives, which could go from homelessness, to hoarding animals, to domestic violence, to even food safety. So it's a lot of elements that people doesn't naturally think, or we don't naturally think of animal welfare when we think about food or food safety, for example, or food security. But there are direct and indirect interconnections that we can actually identify by using this holistic way. And this comes together with the concept of One Health, which was launched in 2007 by the American Medical Association and the American Veterinary Media Association to bring the two professions together to help tackle global pandemics such as avian flu. So basically, it's very relevant to the current COVID-19 pandemic. And the important thing is to actually bring health and welfare together to actually work in a holistic way. So the definition for one welfare is a concept that describes the interrelationships between animal welfare, human well-being, and the physical and social environment. And it's important to specify this because the environment is not just limited to the things around that. It's not just the trees or the animals or the buildings around that, but is more than that. It goes to the social connections between those objects and the beings. So it's more than just a physical aspect, but the environment is also social. So really the concept of one welfare helps professionals understand and recognize that the work we are doing in the food chain or with people, with animals, or with the environment is not just affecting that specific field, but also has an impact in the wider society. And it really highlights that the role every professional has within their sector has a wider impact. And we all really need to learn to identify, to see those impacts and to see how we can collaborate with others. So we designed the One Welfare Framework, which is actually basically a tool to actually help us to bring together multidisciplinary areas of common interest to professionals in different groups. So there are 5 areas, and these were collated in the same way as the definition through a global consultation that we launched. So the 5 sections, very briefly, cover the animal and human abuse and neglect, which has, of course, an impact into farming and livestock sector as well. The social implications of improved animal welfare, and that covers very much socioeconomical aspects, which could be extreme events for weather, for example, or war that has a very big impact on animals and people. And also we have the 3rd section, which focuses very much on production, animal production and livestock, which looks at health and welfare, human well-being, food security and sustainability. And that pretty much looks at aspects such as how the well-being of livestock has an impact on their keepers or the producers and the people around them. The section 4 covers assisted interventions for animals and people. And basically that is looking at the human-animal interactions and how there are different initiatives and approaches to actually bring together people and animal to try to find benefits for the two of us and how the protocols range around them. And there is a final section, not because it's less important, actually to me is one of the more important ones, but you have to give a number to all of them. So section 5 actually talks about improved biodiversity, conservation, environmental aspects, and human well-being. And it talks about a very broad range of things and very complex global challenges, such as wildlife conservation and how that links to food production, how that links to people, to animals, to society. So there are very complex aspects that are unpicked, identifying in a holistic way the 3 elements. So for this session, I wanted to give you very specific examples that relate to food. And what I've done is go to the report that was launched this week related to the pandemic, which was the global report on the food crisis. And even though it doesn't talk about animal welfare, for example, there are a lot of implicit links to the welfare of animals and, of course, the welfare of people. So I've highlighted here a few examples. So you can see the first one with the underline talks about how the households that are dependent on food production and livestock breeding, any disruptions to the food chains are going to have impacts on them. So for example, if you produce cattle and you cannot have access to a livestock market where you sell it, this is going to have an impact on your sales and your production, and it will have a chain effect in terms of how you keep those animals, how you feed them, do you have the money to feed them? So it has a chain effect that affects all the range from the food all the way to the animals and to the lands that they are feeding from. And then we go to the next one. So it talks about semi-nomadic pastoralists, which is quite relevant to some areas of Africa. And here, for example, we have the people element. So we have the people that looks after the animals, they move around. We have the animals, which they are moving around from one area to another, and they use migration routes. And then we have the environment aspects, which in this case is because of the pandemics and of the borders have been closed, so that environmental change is having an impact on the animals and on the people, and then of course on the land. And the welfare aspects are not mentioned here, but of course if you change the migration route of livestock, do they have to walk longer distances, shorter distances? Do they have the same availability of feed for them to actually survive? So there is a whole impact that is not explicitly mentioned, but we really need to start thinking about these separate elements and how they all come together. And we really need to tackle all three elements together to actually find the solution to these difficult global challenges. So they all come together as one welfare. There is one more example I wanted to finish with, which is from the same report. And basically talks about poor livestock body condition, which is usually an indicator of poor animal welfare. So if we look at a herd that has poor livestock body condition, there could be many reasons, because it could be because they don't have enough food to eat, for example. If we combine this with an adverse weather effect on top of it, one of the outcomes could be that actually there is an increase on disease outbreak. So the immune system of these animals would be compromised, and then they can have a disease and fall sick. If this is a notifiable disease, something that spreads very quickly from one animal to another and from one farm to another, then we could end up with movement restrictions. And all of these together combined would have an impact on food availability to people. So again, you can see how the three different elements combine in quite a complex but simple way, and actually impacts the three elements. So again, we really need to tackle all three aspects if we really want to find a solution. So yes, my final reflection today was that we as professionals and everybody across the world must do everything possible to encourage collaborations in a One Health, One Welfare way among the different professionals and sectors to maximize the societal benefits. And the global challenges really need to be addressed holistically, recognizing the interconnections between animals, people, and the environment. So we might tackle all three aspects if we want to find the solution. So that's my contribution to